Every day we make dozens of decisions: what to have for breakfast, what clothes to wear, where to go in the evening. And each time it feels like it's our choice. We control it, right? But what if I told you that perhaps your decision was made even before you thought about it? What if your brain already decided for you, and you're just watching this play unfold? Today, we'll dive into one of the most provocative topics: free will. We'll explore how psychology, philosophy, and neuroscience question our understanding of who really controls our lives. We'll look at famous experiments where scientists tracked brain activity before a person was even aware of their own desire. We'll find out why our choices are influenced by factors we don't even notice. And we'll ask, if free will is a myth, what does that mean for us? If you're also searching for answers to these tough questions and want to understand who controls your life, hit like, subscribe to Mindflux, and share this video with your friends to unravel this puzzle together. So, let's dive into what we really mean by free will. At first glance, it seems like something simple. I decide what I have for breakfast, and that's my freedom. But what if I told you that your decision about oatmeal or a sandwich was already predetermined for you? You'd probably think, what kind of nonsense is that? But, in reality, our choices might not be as independent as they seem. And there are a few scientific examples that might surprise you. Picture this. You decide to raise your hand to grab your coffee. Seems simple, right? Now imagine I tell you, hold up. That wasn't your decision. It was already made for you about half a second ago, and your brain just didn't tell you about it. Wait, what? This isn't magic or some creepy horror movie scene. This is an actual experiment by Benjamin Libet, a neuroscientist. He used EEG, that's when electrodes are attached to your head to track brain activity, not the latest video game, to see what happens in your brain before you consciously decide to do something. Libet discovered that your brain is active up to several hundred milliseconds before you even become aware of making a decision. In other words, you think you're the one deciding, but your brain has already made that choice, and you're just catching up. It's kind of like your brain is the weird friend who decides everything for you, and you just go along with it. Now don't freak out thinking, does this mean I have no control over my life? Libet himself acknowledged that things are more complex than they seem, and there's probably room for free will. But you know, it's kind of like looking at a map and thinking you're planning your route, only to find out that someone else already plotted your trip. But wait, there's more. We don't just get manipulated by big corporations and ads. Even the smallest, seemingly insignificant things can influence us. Like the effect of priming. This is when you can be nudged toward making a choice without even realizing it. For example, if I show you a picture of a beautiful beach, and then offer you a vacation package, you're probably going to choose the beach destination, even if you weren't thinking about it before. Sounds like manipulation, right? Well, in a way it is. But it's actually just how our brains work. They use subtle clues to avoid information overload. Our brains simplify things, and you don't even realize where your preferences came from. Let's make it more relatable with an example from shopping. You walk into a supermarket, and right in front of you is a shelf of yogurts, with big letters saying, "New flavor," and you think, oh, interesting, I'll try it. But here's the trick. You don't even realize that this little detail, those big bold labels, played such a big role in your choice. Yes, you thought it was your decision, but in reality, it's just psychology in action. Or how about the classic ad showing a happy family sitting down to dinner together? What happens in your brain? You start associating that dinner with comfort and warmth. And the next time you're in the store, that image might nudge you toward a specific product, even though you didn't consciously think about it. Suddenly, you don't need to think, what should I buy? Your brain has already steered you in that direction. So, maybe we're not as free in our choices as we'd like to believe. Maybe this whole idea of free will is like an illusion of an open door leading us into a hallway that's already been mapped out for us. And while we think we're making the decision, we're probably already wearing invisible labels, guiding us to pick the same old things. So, as we've seen, our choices may not be as ours as we'd like to think. This naturally leads to a deeper question. How does the brain actually work if even subtle, unnoticed details can influence us? We've touched on the idea that brain activity precedes conscious decisions. But let's dive deeper into how neuroscience explains this process on a fundamental level. Our brain is an incredibly complex machine that operates in ways we're only beginning to understand. When we think we're making a decision, our brain has often already laid the groundwork for it. Did you know that neurons start voting on a decision long before we're aware of it? Imagine your brain as a massive committee where every neuron has its say, and by the time you consciously decide, the vote has already been tallied. It's as if you walk into a meeting and everyone says, "Don't worry, we've already decided for you." But here's a big question. If the brain has already made the decision, why do we need to feel like we're in control? What's the point of having a sense of agency if we're not actually steering the ship? Perhaps this illusion of free will is just a clever trick our brain plays on us to keep us engaged in life. That brings us to the famous Libet experiments, which stirred up this whole debate. While groundbreaking, these experiments haven't gone without criticism. For instance, some scientists argue that Libet's findings are too narrow to make sweeping claims about free will. His studies measured brain activity related to moving a hand, which is just one specific action, and doesn't necessarily represent all kinds of decisions. Plus, there's a difference between becoming aware of a decision and making a decision. So, the idea that free will is an illusion might not be the full story. Perhaps there's still room for free will, but it's subtle and often hidden beneath layers of unconscious processing. This leads to an intriguing question. If neurons decide before we're even aware of it, and our preferences are shaped invisibly, what do we really mean when we talk about choice? When we view the world through the lens of determinism, a fascinating picture emerges. Every event is the result of a prior cause, like a line of dominoes where each fall is inevitable. Everything in nature, from the orbits of planets to the beating of your heart, follows the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology. While this idea is awe-inspiring, it raises a troubling question. If every action is predetermined, where is the space for freedom? Philosophers like Pierre-Simon Laplace argued that if a being could know the position of every particle in the universe and the laws governing them, it could predict everything, from the fall of an apple to your next decision. In this view, every choice you make isn't an act of will, but the outcome of a chain of causes you don't control. You choose because you're shaped by genetics, upbringing, circumstances, or even the exact state of your brain in a given moment. But if everything is predetermined, why do we feel free? This is where determinism collides with the paradox of human perception. We intuitively feel in control of our actions, but this control might be an illusion, comforting yet false. For instance, when you decide to go for a run instead of staying on the couch, it feels like your decision. But a determinist might say, no, it's the result of countless factors, from your metabolism to a morning conversation with a friend about exercise. What if freedom and determinism aren't mortal enemies? This is where compatibilism enters the conversation, a philosophical attempt to reconcile these ideas. Compatibilists argue that freedom isn't the absence of causality. It's the ability to act according to your desires and intentions, even if those desires are themselves determined. Imagine you're riding a train. The tracks determine the route, that's determinism, but within the train, you're free to choose where to sit, read a book, or listen to music. Compatibilism claims that we're free as long as our actions stem from internal motivations rather than external coercion. Let's take an example. Suppose you're in a shop choosing between chocolate and vanilla ice cream. If you pick chocolate because you prefer it, that's your choice. But why do you prefer chocolate? Maybe it's because your parents often bought you chocolate ice cream as a child, or perhaps your brain is wired to respond to chocolate flavors. Sure, those preferences are determined, but in that moment of choice, you're still acting according to your desires. Critics of compatibilism, like Arthur Schopenhauer, challenge this notion. He famously said, "A man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." If your desires are shaped by genes, society, or circumstances, are they truly yours? Here's another analogy. Imagine a puppeteer controlling a marionette. The puppet can move, dance, and even choose where to step. but its choices are confined by the strings that control it. Compatibilism suggests that it's not about being free from the strings. It's about moving meaningfully within their limits. But the question remains, if our actions are always conditioned, can we truly call them free? Or is freedom simply the conscious acceptance of what we cannot control? Some philosophers propose that free will isn't a gift, but an intricate illusion, one that helps us feel responsible for our lives. So, is it freedom if our choices are constrained by the chains of cause and effect? Or is it just a convenient narrative we tell ourselves to feel in charge? We've explored determinism, its challenges, and the compromises offered by compatibilism. But philosophy doesn't stop there. There's another school of thought that claims freedom is possible if we recognize the forces influencing us and learn how to manage them. This is the Libertarian perspective, offering a fresh way to think about our choices. Libertarians in philosophy approach freedom differently. For them, it isn't about the absence of causality, but about the ability to understand and control the forces shaping our decisions. This perspective suggests that even in a deterministic world, humans can break free from the chain of causes by becoming aware of them and actively intervening. Consider mindfulness and meditation practices. When you meditate, you learn to notice your thoughts, emotions, and reactions without automatically acting on them. For example, loud noises on the street might irritate you. Normally, you'd react with frustration or anger, but through mindfulness, you can recognize the process and choose a different response. At that moment, you're not just reacting, you're choosing. Here's a simpler example. Imagine you suddenly crave chocolate cake. You realize this craving stems from fatigue, which often triggers a desire for sweets. With that awareness, you consciously decide either to eat the cake, knowing it will satisfy the craving, or to skip it to stay aligned with your health goals. Libertarians argue that in these moments of awareness and deliberate choice, we come closest to true freedom. But let's take this deeper. If you become fully aware of the external and internal factors influencing you, does that make your choice truly free? Or is it just another layer of determinism, where awareness itself becomes another mechanism of causality? If you become aware of what influences you, does that make your choice truly free? This question isn't merely rhetorical, it invites you to examine your own actions. When was the last time you noticed that your reaction was driven by something external? Perhaps now is the time to pause, take a step back, and ask yourself, what part of this was truly my choice? We've explored a range of questions and ideas, from how our brains make decisions before we're even aware of them, to whether we can truly claim to be free in a world governed by natural laws. We've discovered that even being aware of the forces influencing us doesn't always guarantee freedom. It might just be another layer of determinism. But here's the key. Perhaps freedom isn't an absolute state, but a process. It's about learning to understand ourselves, our desires, and our circumstances more deeply. It's a choice, not over everything in the world, but over how we choose to perceive and shape our lives. Mindfulness, reflection, and the courage to ask tough questions can help us move closer to a sense of freedom. Now, the choice is yours. Continue as you were, or pause for a moment, reflect on everything we've discussed, and start noticing what truly influences your decisions. Freedom starts with a single step. Ask yourself, what's influencing my decisions right now? Try to notice it in your daily life. Want to go deeper? Practice mindfulness or start a simple journal to track your choices. In the meantime, share your thoughts in the comments. What do you believe true freedom is? And remember, your thoughts are the first step toward freedom.